Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to take you through the process of buying a yacht. I'm going to show you the yachts that I looked at and how I arrived at the decision that I made on the boat that we ended up buying. Well, I had to start somewhere, and when I made the decision to buy a yacht for our family so we could sail around the world, I had to set down some criteria. There's a well-known yacht designer called Ted Brewer who'd come up with a bunch of formulas that he says are all very much tongue-in-cheek. So with a grain of salt, I had a look at his formulas and realized that I could use some of those formulas to start defining what I might consider as a blue water cruiser. And that included things like the capsize screen formula, the comfort ratio, which apparently if it's above 35 is a good thing for an offshore cruising boat. And then there's also the sail displacement ratio, which tells you whether there's going to be good performance from the boat. Of course, I wasn't going to use those formulas for the only criteria. The other criteria that I took on board were budget, purpose, where to buy, and where to store the boat. Including my overarching criteria, which were going to be a vessel that had a fin keel, a skeg-hung rudder, had a moderate underbody, something that was elliptical, and a moderate displacement with some sort of speed and maneuverability. The other criteria that I wanted was a ketch, which that might seem a little old school, but if you think about it, when you've got a family on board a yacht, the last thing you want to be doing is pulling in large sails, pulling in lots of sheets, and running around trying to organise your genoa, which is the size of a football field. So a ketch seemed to make sense, that it was going to be a lot more stable, might not point to wind as well, but at least my family and I could control the vessel when we needed to. And it has a number of advantages, of course, in strong seas and strong winds. So I set off with Ted's formulas and started doing some comparisons. These comparisons were not to be taken seriously, but they gave me a basis on which I could look at a bunch of different brands of vessels. And that list of vessels that I looked at, I'm not going to bore you because I looked at anything between 50 and 70 different vessels over a 2-year period and narrowed it down to a number. But some of those were the Tayana 55, the Nator Swan 51, which is a lovely vessel. Had a look at the Amels, the Oldens, Little Harbours, which are super good in strong seas. The Oyster 56, a little expensive, but a nice boat. And I looked at a couple of production boats, in particular the Jeanneau Sun Odyssey 54DS. Again, another vessel that, if you had the money, you may buy. Would I take it across big oceans? Yeah, possibly. So I set about looking at the criteria and then going online and hopping onto yachtworld.com and putting in some details in there. So my search stats were 12 meters to 18 meters, 1990 to 2010. I looked at all boats from around about 100,000 US through to 450,000 US. Not that my budget was extended to 450,000 US, given the fact that one of the big expenses that you'll incur with buying a boat is the boat storage and boat repairs after you've purchased the boat. So I looked everywhere. I looked in Holland at some beautiful boats there. I looked in the US at a number of vessels there. That was going to be difficult to get the boat from the US to Australia without incurring huge taxes. And then I turned my attention to Australia, where I could not find anything that was suitable in a ketch. There was a boat in Langkawi that may have done the job, but again, I wasn't getting a good response back from the yacht broker. So I turned my attention to New Zealand, knowing that New Zealand produced some really fine vessels. I came across 3 steel ketches in New Zealand. One was built by a businessman who was looking to move the boat on after he'd had it for about 10 years. After I did some investigations and rang a couple of brokers, One of them said, "Look, you're better off leaving that vessel alone. It's going to take a lot of money to bring it back up to speed." And then I came across a Sullivan 54, which is the vessel that I ended up buying. And communication between myself and the yacht broker was a resounding success. He was very attentive, gave me all the details I needed, and never once stopped to question some of the ludicrous things that I required from him to better assess the boat. One of the important aspects of purchasing the boat was making sure that I got a surveyor that understood steel vessels, including how a steel vessel was built. The other thing that you'd want with a surveyor for any vessel, I guess, but more importantly for a steel vessel, is have the equipment so they can actually test the thickness of the steel, especially in areas where if a layperson like myself was to do it, I wouldn't be able to test correctly. Anyway, the surveyor was done for the technical aspects of the vessel. Now all I needed to do was organise the mechanical survey, which included all of the engines, the gensets, the fuel systems, and anything to do with that aspect of the vessel. That was done by a mechanic in Opea Marina, and that took a number of weeks before that was done, as there was further tests on the fluid. They did a chemical test, which came back with a 97% clear test, which is apparently very, very good. The mechanic was very impressed with the engine. He said that he hadn't seen a vessel that was 30 years old with an engine in such pristine condition. I had a number of conversations with him about other aspects of the vessel and what needed to be repaired. He'd made some additional remarks about the boat. And so that became part of my compilation of making sure that what I was buying unseen was going to fit the criteria for our family.